night, yeah. Make all the demons quiet, yeah. We were built to thrive, yeah. I think that we've all had enough. What keeps you up at night, yeah. Make all the demons quiet, yeah. We were built to thrive, yeah. I think that we've all had enough. Yeah, I think that we've all had enough. Sick of dealing with the old plan. They know that we're calling it wrong. You got me like, oh yeah, I think that we've all had enough. Sick of dealing with the old plan. They know that we're calling it wrong. Hey, it's too late to try to go contain it. A generation fueled by creation. We live lives on a small screen nation. We control the airwaves, no negotiation. I refuse to think we need saving. Something good will come from creation. And when we think that the world is too anxious, we'll adapt, evolve, survive, and save it. What keeps you up at night, yeah. Make all the demons quiet, yeah. We were built to thrive, yeah. I think that we've all had enough. What keeps you up at night, yeah. Make all the demons quiet, yeah. We were built to thrive, yeah. I think that we've all had enough. Yeah, I think that we've all had enough. Sick of dealing with the old plan. They know that we're calling it wrong. You got me like, oh yeah, I think that we've all had enough. Sick of dealing with the old plan. They know that we're calling it wrong. Hey, oh yeah, I think that we've all had enough. Sick of dealing with the old plan. They know that we're calling it wrong. You got me like, oh yeah, I think that we've all had enough. Sick of dealing with the old plan. They know that we're calling it wrong.
Oh, look at me. I'm retarded. I'm a globe.
The whole system is designed to disconnect you from your intuition. Why? Disconnected people are easy to manipulate. Everything from sunscreen to politics to the food industry. It's all designed to disconnect and manipulate you. We are in the middle of a war right now, but it's not a traditional war. It's a war on consciousness. It's a war on freedom. This is the time to listen, not to the news. No, your intuition, your gut, your heart. Love is the greatest weapon against darkness. How do you love more? You begin by loving yourself. How do you love yourself? You listen to the messages your body is telling you.
I'm scared, Dad.
Do you trust me, son?
Yes.
Come on, son. Rule number 1, never trust anybody.
All right, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Sovereign Soul Unchained Mind, coming to you 250 miles above your imagination from the international fake station, this IT nightmare we like to call home. I'm up here with my good friend and co-pilot, Sum-Ting Wong, and he is here to make sure that we fly along straight and level across this beautiful plane that we live upon. So today we have us a special guest. His name is Kent Reynolds, and I met Kent Reynolds in some forums on Facebook, and he agreed to come on and give his case for a globe. So I want to welcome, I'm assuming England. I'm not exactly sure. We had a little mix up with the time zones. So this is one of the, why don't we just all use Greenwich time? I don't know. Anyway, I assume that that's where he's from, but in any case, that's not important. This is why that's why the show is early today. So here we are at this early hour, and we're taking care of business, right? All right. So here's Kent is up here. Welcome, Kent. How are you today?
Thank you so much. And good evening, I think, to you, because yeah, it was my fault with the mix-up. Got the PM and the AM mixed up, but
it's 2:04 in the afternoon here.
Right. Okay. It's for yeah, it's but 7:02 in the evening over here.
Oh, okay, cool. That's a good time for you. Yeah.
Not a bad time, yes. But sorry, I've got you into your channel a bit early.
Oh, that's all right. That's all right, man. We're here and everything's cool. Got some great people out in the chat. Some that I don't recognize. Maybe they're people that you've invited. I'm not sure. But I see I got Dorian Gray here with us. Shifty Eyes Shady, how you doing, my friend? That Way has joined us. Chris is here with us. Is that a little smiley face? It looks like something gay. Wong is gay. Run away, LJ. Now that's casting aspersions on my co-pilot. You can't be doing that. There's Brad and Tasha, possibly one, the other, or both. We have a pretty cool friend, Chris. Angela Baby Carson, how you doing, sweetheart? Only Up Dots, Spitfire, who I miss? Sean Alke. Of course, Sean's going to be here. Angela's here. He's got to be. It's a team effort. We got Hercules, DJD, Homework, Gene Edited. I saw Flatzoid in here, although I know he's got a show coming up with Planar Walk here around the same time, so I hope I'm not stepping on his broadcast. But anyway, with no further ado, let's get into things. So Kent, you think or believe that the Earth is a globe rotating around a large body of hydrogen or something in a void, a near vacuum. How did you discover that this was what the Earth was? How did that come along? I mean, was you walking along one day and said, "Hey, I think I live on a ball that's spinning around"?
Sure. Okay. Well, let me just start off by saying that I don't have an anti-flat Earth channel or anything like that, nor am I an expert in all the arguments in favor of one or the other. And as you know, I only got involved in this because I was having an interesting and lively debate with you on Facebook yesterday, and you suggested let's have a live debate, and I thought, well, why not? So yeah, I'm glad you used the word rotate because I have seen a lot of flat earthers use the word spin, which is of course a little bit of a misdescription of the globe Earth theory, because the theory is that the Earth rotates at 1 revolution per day, which is quite a slow rate of rotation. So I'll basically just launch into my argument, and I can explain, how it is that I came to these points of view. I've only had a.
Can I first ask one initial question?
Sure.
Did you discover that you lived on a rotating globe Earth and then found out that you were right? Or were you first told that you live on a globular rotating Earth and then were given reasons as to why that was true?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think obviously you learn about the Earth being a globe through your education system, and you're necessarily a child when you first learn, I guess. So I think the point you're getting at is that your senses tell you that you live on a flat plane, because that's what the Earth is on your everyday scales. And I guess it's not, you've characterized it as you discover that you live on a globe. And I don't think, as somebody who believes in the globe Earth theory, that that's how it comes about.
Yeah, I think that's going to be a very major point. Yeah, that's going to become a very major point in this discussion.
Sure. So I think you get taught certain things, and then when you learn about other things and physical theories, and you observe other phenomena, and it all fits together, and it seems to be the only theory really that supports observation.
So in other words, if nobody had ever told you this, that you live on a rotating globular Earth, if nobody had ever told you that, you probably would never have come to the conclusion or even started to think such a thing, would you?
Yeah, I think you might be partly right, in the sense that if you had no education whatsoever, somebody grew up in a jungle somewhere.
Well, see, that's where my point is
they wouldn't
who came to that idea in the first place? I mean, somebody must have been bebopping along, doing their daily stuff, making observations as we all do throughout the day and the night, and then suddenly said to themselves, you know what? Based on everything I see, I must be on a ball. I must be on a globular, spherical Earth, despite not having any indication of such a thing. That's what I'm trying to get at. How would anybody ever come to think such a, I mean, really, in its inception, if you really think about it, if you were to wait until somebody was, I don't know, say 15, 18 years old, okay, 18 years old, never been exposed to globe Earth or anything at all. They've reached a point where they now have at least a moniker of critical thinking, right? And then somebody comes to them and tells them this story, tells them that no, you actually, despite everything that you think, you actually live on a globe, a round ball, and it's rotating around. How do you think that that person would respond to that without the early indoctrination? Because let's face it, they hit you with that at a very, very early age, before the critical thinking skills.
But you could say the same thing about the sort of nano scale and the micro scale, and that if somebody tells you that things are made of atoms and then you've got protons and neutrons and electrons,
right, which
it's a similar thing, right?
Is another theory, which again is another theoretical thing, because nobody's ever really witnessed any of this.
Yeah. Well, anyway, shall we get into the arguments for?
Sure.
Well, by all means, these aren't necessarily exclusive or anything like that. And I dare say a lot of these arguments, you'll have heard them before. There won't be anything new in what I'm going to say. And I anticipate probably not an awful lot of new in what you'll say in response. So I want to start with a slightly controversial comment, which is to say that I think flat earthers are almost correct. I think you've actually touched upon some of what I was going to say anyway, which is that the Earth is almost flat, and it is flat on our everyday scales, because obviously there's a scale, you know, there's a galactical scale, and there's a micro scale and a nanoscale. So on our everyday scales, miles, meters, the Earth is, I mean, obviously it's not completely flat. We know that because it's got undulations and hills, but I mean, I think what flat earthers mean is that it's flat with respect to the plane. So it's almost flat, but the curvature is very slight, and this is because the Earth is incredibly large, and it's sometimes quite difficult to conceptualize it. But and I've looked up the precise figures. It's before coming on. It's roughly 12,700 kilometers in diameter, which is very big. And on those scales, it won't be possible to observe the curve very easily. And even at the flight, the height of a domestic flight, which I also looked up, which I think was it's somewhere between 9 and 12 kilometers. You're talking about a factor of 1,000 times. The height of an aeroplane is a factor of 1,000 less than the diameter of the Earth at the equator. So even from that height, you're not necessarily going to be able to easily observe.
Well, even in the photograph that I used for a thumbnail, for this show today, that's at over 120,000 feet. Now, I don't know what I'm going to do here is I'm going to grab my phone here in a minute, because I got a converter on there. We use this stupid method over here that we've all been brought up with. I'm almost 60 years old, so I've been using inches, feet, miles, and that crap. And so I always have to calculate over into kilometers, because I talk to a lot of people and they're always using kilometers, and I'm like, oh, okay, I have to convert that over. So the average aircraft is 35,000 feet, which in your case, you said, what is it, 8 to 9 kilometers? Is that correct?
Like that, yeah.
Okay, all right.
But we're talking about roughly 1,000 times the factor. So,
can I ask one question on that? Sure. You spoke of a diameter of a sphere. Can I ask, where did the R value for that calculation come from?
Where did it come from? Well,
yeah, how did they get the radius value? for the sphere.
Well, they would have observed that from aircraft flying and.
Well, no, they had an R value for it before we had aircraft.
Yeah, well, I believe that. I mean, I'm not an expert in this area, but I believe that that was got a note of it here. A long time ago, there was a chap called. I'm sure you've come across the name. I may be mispronouncing this. Eratosthenes, who in 276 to 194 BC carried out.
Eratosthenes.
That's right.
I call him Aaron Crusty. Okay.
Sure.
And before you go into the thing, I'm sure everybody in here knows all about Eratosthenes. And maybe I put out a post about Eratosthenes and why he should not be used by anyone at all. Okay. Eratosthenes was not trying to prove a spherical Earth. Eratosthenes, and this is if he actually existed, because he just sort of appeared in Rockefeller-funded textbooks in the 20th century. Then you started finding out shit about him. All of a sudden, everybody was talking about Eratosthenes, okay? He wasn't trying to prove a spherical Earth. He already assumed a spherical Earth. He was just trying to figure out how big, okay? And in order to do that, he had to make more assumptions beyond the assumption of sphericity or convexity of the Earth. He had to think, he had to assume a distant sun. So in other words, a distant light source. And he also assumed parallel sun rays. Another thing that he didn't even have any idea about, nor did he add into his equations, was that for refraction. So Eratosthenes he didn't prove anything. He assumed the Earth to be a globe, and he set about trying to figure out how big of a globe it was. So
sure. Well, I'm not saying that he proved it was a globe, but just to ask you, you accept that he came up with the answers that he did come up with, and how do you explain on a flat Earth model how he could have come to those angles and those observations?
Easy. All you have to do is have a closer light source in a level plane. You can do it in your front room. I can set up a series of cans across the floor and use a flashlight or even the light in the ceiling. And each object will cast a different shadow. If I do spherical math, if I try to do math to make it be a sphere to figure out how big of it, well, yeah, I'll come up with an answer. But that's on the assumption of my floor in my kitchen being convex. And as we all know, it's not convex because a level was used to construct it. You understand? So yeah, there again, either way, it wouldn't be proof of anything because, yeah, it'll work on a ball with a distant light, and it'll also work on a flat surface with a local light. So we're in the same boat.
Yeah, but I think for me, there are lots of things that observationally they support the globe Earth theory, and you might be able to say, oh, well, there's another explanation for this, and there's another explanation for that. But when you add it all up, they're all consistent with the globe Earth theory. And then when you've got that many things that are consistent with it, you reach a conclusion that on balance, that is more likely to be the correct.
Well, though, when you examine the so-called evidence, though, and you find out that it's merely circumstantial, and you've merely sung together a series of circumstantial evidences that have other explanations that are more logical, each and of themselves, then you really don't have anything because most of them are based on assumptions, these observations. Okay. And I know you're probably talking about long distance observations. Well, long distance observations have actually proved that it's not a sphere, at least not the size that we're given. That's for sure. Because all we do, people don't understand that your field of view is compromised at the horizon line. Okay, so you see the ground sloping up toward the horizon line in your view when you look straight ahead. We have hyperbolic vision. Everything goes in from top to down, from down to up, left to right, right to left. Everything is kind of going like that. Now your field of view is this cone you can see in. You have a full field of view of the ground up until the horizon point. At that horizon line, your field of view is now compromised by just a little less than 50% because it's just below eye level. Now, when things are going off into the distance, of course, they get smaller they appear to get smaller as they go into the distance. You see this wholly when your field of view is completely on the object, but now the object has hit the horizon line. And now, beyond, as it travels beyond your vision, it still gets smaller, but because your field of view is compromised by the horizon itself, it appears to disappear from the bottom up. But by increasing our field of view with simple elevation, we see that not only do we bring the entire object back into view, we've extended the horizon line beyond the target object. And we can do this all day long until the angular resolution of the object itself becomes too small to even distinguish.
Yeah, but what you've described is also consistent with a spherical Earth and it disappearing below the horizon, because that's exactly what happens at the Burj Khalifa in Dubai, where, and this has been, I haven't been there myself, but people have observed this. It's on YouTube that you can be on the ground level, watch the sunset, then you can take a lift up to the top and then watch the sunset again, and that is exactly what you would expect on a globe Earth, with the sun disappearing off over the curve.
To a limit, though. To a limit. Okay, because once you reach a certain altitude, okay, and this is no longer taking place, what's going to happen, a physical curve like that is going to start to drop below your horizon line, below the line where it was at relative to your eyesight, which is just below eye level. It's just below eye level. If it were a ball, once you started to increase in elevation, you would get to a point where the horizon actually starts to drop relative to eye level. And it doesn't do that. It would have to do it in all directions because it's not a cylinder. Remember, it's a sphere.
Right.
And each time you increase to the radius of that sphere, which is what the globe says you're doing with altitude, right? You are always at the highest point of the arc. What is the highest point? Anywhere that you're at. So you would begin to see the horizon not only drop below eye level, you would also see it start to drop in all directions. And we don't see that at all, not even above 120,000 feet. Felix Baumgartner's jump at, I think it was 135,000 feet, something like that. I'm not sure, but it was even higher. And when he jumped out, there was still no curvature. You can see it when the capsule is opened from the inside. You can see the camera on the inside. There's obviously a GoPro lens. It's going to give you show curvature, but that curvature would mean that the state of New Mexico takes up at least a third of the Earth. And we know that's not the case. And he actually, if you watch the footage as he's coming down, you see it go convex, and then it goes concave, flat, then it goes concave, then it goes back to flat, and then convex again. So it's like the perspective of it just doesn't add up. It just doesn't. This is why we can go, if I have level here, it's level with something in China. It's going to be level with something in Mexico. It's going to be level with something there where you're at right now. There's no deviation from level.
Yeah, on a flat Earth model, wouldn't the Earth get smaller as it gets further away, as well as disappearing over the horizon?
Well, as you stated earlier, the Earth is very, very large. And unfortunately, the altitude necessary to get to a level where that starts happening can't be obtained. We can't obtain that altitude.
Okay. Well, it seems like I mentioned something that's consistent with the globe, and then you explain how it's also consistent with your model. So one's not sort of going ahead of the other one. It's
So
just
we've
two
got
things.
common ground.
Yeah. But anyway, shall I run through my points, and then obviously
Sure,
you
go
come
ahead.
back. We can exchange points.
Sure,
So
I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll mood up, and you just do your thing.
yeah, sure. Okay. So my first point is, in no particular order, photos from space. So the argument is there are thousands of photos and videos taken by various space agencies, NASA, not just NASA, but also European ones, Russian ones, Japanese ones. Now also India has a space agency, and they have shown the Earth to be spherical. These are consistent across different missions from multiple different organizations. There are flat earthers who claim that these photos are fake, but one would have to ask the level of cover up and conspiracy that would have to be in existence. You'd have to have the astronomers, you'd have to have people at NASA, you'd have to have people at other organizations knowing that the Earth is a shape other than as a globe, and be in some kind of huge a conspiracy to deceive everybody. And whilst that may not be impossible, it's, I would say, implausible for that to have taken place. There are no compelling photographs, certainly that I've seen, that somebody's taken of the Earth showing a flat shape. And I would also argue that flat is a particular shape. It's a very precise shape. Any shape other than flat, almost flat, slightly flattish, isn't flat. Flat is a very unique shape, which would be highly unlikely to occur in nature. The other point is that a lot of the flat earthers don't necessarily agree with each other on the shape of the flat Earth. Some say that there's some thickness underneath, some say not, some say it's a dome, some people don't have the dome, whereas the globe Earth model seems to be much more consistent amongst different people. My second point is on celestial bodies and spheres. So when you look at the moon and you look at the sun, they're spherical, and anybody with a telescope can have a look and see planets such as Jupiter, Mars, they're all spheres. And then one asks oneself, well, wouldn't it be a little bit of a coincidence if those are all spheres and the Earth is somehow different and is flat? And then we've got also the lunar eclipse, which is another piece of evidence in favor of the globe, is that that's where on the globe Earth model, the Earth sits in between the sun and the moon at that particular point, blocking light onto the moon, and it does so in a spherical shape, which is consistent with the globe Earth model, and would be difficult to see if the Earth was flat. My next point actually is one that you've now touched on, which is the ships disappearing over the horizon bottom first. I have seen some flat Earth arguments that perhaps that's down to waves or wind or the water being uneven, but it goes bottom first in a very consistent way. And that's also consistent with the globe Earth model and difficult to understand under a flat Earth model. And this is something that you can observe with binoculars and a telescope. My next point is on circumnavigation. So some people have explored the Earth and circumnavigated it and arrived back in the same place they were in when they started. Magellan's expedition in the 16th century is a good example, and there are military aircraft that have circumnavigated the globe. That wouldn't be possible on a flat Earth model. My next point is I think quite a compelling point, which is to do with the shape of the Earth and gravity. And I know that a lot of flat earthers don't subscribe to gravity, and I think you might be one of them, Sov. But the theory of gravity is that it pulls in all directions, and there's a reason why planets and objects like the sun and other stars are that shape. It's a natural tendency to become that shape, where you've got a certain critical mass, because gravity is an attractive force between different masses, basically. So the larger the mass, the greater the force of attraction. If you've got an object being formed through the stellar dust, it will naturally contract into a spherical shape. If you look at the moons of Mars, which I think are called Phobos and I think it's Deimos or Deimos, those two moons are rocky shaped and jagged, and they're not spheres, and that's because they're smaller and they don't have enough gravity to form that perfect spherical shape, which you see with the moon, you see with the sun, and you see with the Earth. If on a flat Earth model, there was some difficulty with gravity, and I think that's why a lot of flat Earthers don't subscribe to gravity, because it's inconsistent. Because if you had a flat Earth, then if gravity was pulling downward, it wouldn't pull in the same way, and you would have very different gravitational forces at different places on the Earth. Time zones is my next point. So where you've got different time zones, and we've even experienced this now on this video call, it's very well explained by the globe Earth. You know, you've got the Earth is rotating, and Australia sees the sun first, and America sees it last, and it's very consistent with the globe Earth model. The seasons are another good example, very well explained by the axial tilt. If you have a model and it's tilted and you've got a light source, you can replicate something very similar to what we see with the different nights and day, and the different temperatures you get in winter and in summer, due to the fact that if the Earth is spinning at a fixed angle but is rotating around the sun, then the southern hemisphere will face the sun for half the year, well, for a certain point at half of the year, and then it swaps round. Not saying it can't be explained on a flat Earth model, but it's very well explained on a globe Earth model, and is more difficult to explain, I think we can say, on a flat Earth model. The Coriolis effect is my next point. I'm not sure how many of the viewers are familiar with it, but the Coriolis effect, essentially, I'm no expert on physics, but essentially, as I understand it, it's to do with the fact that the Earth rotates, the atmosphere around the Earth also rotates, but not necessarily at the same speed, and it creates air currents, and they seem to be an anti-clockwise direct flow of air, and this sometimes creates cyclones. By the way, these cyclones never cross the equator, and that's because the Coriolis effect actually weakens as it crosses over onto the other side. That's consistent with the globe Earth theory, and is difficult to explain on a flat Earth theory. This causes a lot of weather patterns and is down to the rotation of the Earth. We've got the stars and constellations argument, which is to do with the fact that, for example, the moon, if you observe the moon in the southern hemisphere, you're actually looking at it upside down compared to how you see it on the northern hemisphere, which is, again, inconsistent with the globe Earth theory, and difficult to explain on a flat Earth theory. The constellations that we see in the night sky change as you travel north and south as well. People in the southern hemisphere cannot see the North Star Polaris, and vice versa. This, I would say, would be difficult to observe on a flat Earth. You've got aeroplane travel and navigation, long-haul flights between cities in the southern hemisphere that make sense only on a globe. For example, between Australia and South America are direct. On a flat Earth, the routes would be extremely difficult and illogical. You also have the point that two cities, if you connect them with a straight line, what you'll find is that the flight path taken actually goes different to a straight line and still manages to reach its destination quicker than it would have done had it traveled the straight line. For example, a London to New York flight will fly over Ireland and touch the edge of Greenland and then come down. And that's actually a more efficient route. It's because the Earth is a globe and the circumference of the globe varies on latitude. We've covered the Eratosthenes experiment, so I'll leave that one. Satellite communications and GPS. GPS, as we're very familiar with, it's in our phones, we use it for sat-nav, relies on a network of satellites orbiting the Earth. The system wouldn't work properly on a flat Earth. But just to come on to my last point, just to anticipate a few points that flat earthers argue. So I think we've dealt with horizons on my list, but we've dealt with that. So the water finding its own level, I want to deal with that because that comes up a lot. I don't know for what you argue one of these points of, but I have seen it argued that water sticks to a ball, and I've never quite understood that argument because it assumes that gravity works north to south, which is not what the gravitational theory says. Gravity works, as I described earlier, by pulling towards the center of the object of mass. And therefore, you wouldn't expect water to fall off the Earth because if it was falling off, then that would suggest that there's something underneath the Earth pulling it down. Now, in space, and I don't know how many people accept the notion of space, but in space, no one direction is special over any other direction. It's only here on Earth that we've got the perspective of the ground and we feel the effect of gravity, that we know what's down, what's up, what's right, what's left. In space, you would get disorientated very quickly if you had no reference point. So the idea that there is something pulling down, well, there isn't really a down in space. You've just got the Earth and the planets are orbiting the sun in more or less the same, it's not exactly the same plane, but it's more or less the same plane. So that's always a very difficult one to understand. And I think it just comes down to a slight misunderstanding of physics, that water finds its level. Well, it only does that really because there's a force of gravity pulling it down, and so that it's a liquid, so it basically just finds its level in that sense. But if you're in a situation of zero gravity or weightlessness, the natural shape of a water droplet is actually a sphere, and it will float, and it's due to the surface tension, and so it's gravity that forces it to act differently to that natural shape. And I think that's probably more or less most of my points covered. Shall I let you come in sort of on a few of those points?
Anytime. I've been writing down
Sure. Yes,
points as you've been going. And if Craig McNeil happens to see this, or Toon, or any of the rest of these fellas out there, that's how you do it instead of interrupting your guest. Okay, that's how you do it, you know. And you don't go in and start focusing on minutia and shit like that. There's time for that once the case is presented, and that's where we are at right now. I want to start out by saying that first and foremost, flat is not a shape. Okay, flat is a condition, and I don't really say that the Earth is flat. I observe the Earth as a level topographical plane contained within a dynamic fluid pressure system. Now I can comfortably say contained, and we will get into that in just a moment. Okay. You brought up NASA photos. We're going to get into why NASA photos, okay, and especially in today's day and age. Photographs and videos are not proof of shit. Not anymore. They may at once have been, but let's face it, photographs and movies have been able to be manipulated and altered to give a different perception as to what's actually occurring since the technology was invented. So we really can't use pictures and video unless we actually shot the video and took the picture ourselves and we know to ourselves that that is real. Okay, so that's out of here. Now, as far as you said, as far as a conspiracy involving, you know, what, literally millions of people, no, that's not necessary at all. It's only necessary for a few at the top. Compartmentalization is very, very effective at keeping something under wraps. For instance, when you see all those guys sitting there in front of those consoles, you know, the ones that stand up and high five each other when they land on Mars and all that, right? Okay. They've been doing simulations that are indistinguishable from the real mission on those machines, those computers, and those screens for months. They have no idea if what they just thought was real was actually a simulation again or not. They've merely been told and watched them shoot something up into the sky. Okay, these things are not, and the whole idea of how would you get through the containment necessary to have this dynamic fluid pressure system in which we live. That is physically impossible. Okay, now what you said about the water taking a shape in a theoretical place that defies the second law of thermodynamics, I suppose it would go into a shape that could be considered globular, but will it be spherical? No. And the reason for that is this: there is never a situation where an object is not subject to a medium. Now, this thing, most of your arguments rely on two things: a fictional place that defies the second law of thermodynamics called space, and the magic duct tape that has been used to sell the lie that we call gravity. Gravity, okay? Gravity is based on a myth. This myth being mass attracting mass. That's a myth. Secondly, if there were gravity, such as you speak, then it would have to be consistent on everything. Yet it is not. Now, I know you might think that they dropped a bowling ball and a feather inside of a vacuum chamber, and my question is this: why was a vacuum chamber used? Aha, to manipulate or modulate the medium. Was the medium removed? No, it was not, because there's no such thing as a true vacuum. So the modulation that took place was not gravity to get the effect of the independent variable. It was the medium. Now, as can be demonstrated, any object, as you reduce the pressure inside by removing the constants, like in a vacuum chamber, I call it a very low pressure system. Not even that, just a low pressure system. It's a very low pressure system, extremely low pressure system can't even be achieved. That's theoretical, okay? And when an object is placed in a vacuum chamber and the medium is removed, the object will gain weight. What did I do? I decreased the density of the medium. When I increase the density of the medium, the object becomes lighter. If I increase the density of the medium to be per volume the same as the object, nothing will happen. It will remain static. It will only move if something moves it. Now, if I continue to increase the medium to where it is denser per volume, than the independent variable, that being the object will now begin to float. Okay, so that's where I'm at with gravity. Planets are round. You can tell the Earth is a globe. Just look at the sky. First and foremost, things in the sky have nothing to do and do not dictate the condition of where you are viewing them from. The things you see in the sky appear to be spherical, but are they? I can show you a thing right now where there's 5 different objects that I could show them to you. And you can't pick which one's the sphere out of those 5 objects. They all look like spheres, but you can't pick which one is actually a sphere. So yeah, it would appear that some of these things do look like spheres. Now, the only place that we see it, because you talked about these moons around Mars and what their shapes are and all that, no one has ever seen that other than through the images provided to you by a government-controlled agency. You've never seen that. I've never seen that. You've never looked through a telescope and seen that. They sold you images. Now, let's see, where was we at? Time zones. Time zones. Okay. There's actually more time zones in the South. I think there's like 32 or 36 time zones in the South. There's 24 in the mid-range between the tropics. And then in the north, just to the north of the tropic, in the north, there's like 12. Now, that's interesting. So time zones are a mess, as we experienced earlier, all right? Cyclones and hurricanes, okay, real simple. Coriolis effect, that is bunk, because the air is not Velcro. Air is not a contiguous mass at all. It's no more than sand is, okay? And people compare the mass of the atmosphere with a mass of a solid. Well, you don't have that. It's the difference between having 5 square feet of sand and 5 square feet of hardened concrete. One of them I can screw a hook into or put straps around and pick up. The other one I can't do that with. I can only pick up a small amount of it at a time. So it doesn't work as one independent thing. It's not stuck to the earth. Otherwise, we wouldn't have the winds that blow in the opposite directions. Now, as far as cyclones and hurricanes, it's just a matter of which direction the ingredients for the storm are introduced. Whether the cold air comes in from the south and goes north to meet the warm, or whether the warm or the cold air from the north comes down and meets the warm air to the south. There's really nothing to do with a spin of the earth or any other such thing. This is the same thing with like the drain going a certain direction, whether you're on one side of the equator or another. If that were true, my bathroom must be setting right on the equator, because my toilet goes one way and my sink goes the other. And what's worse, the shower drain goes down the opposite direction as the sink drain, and they're right, like almost next to each other. So that's a problem. So I don't see those as a proof. There again, as I said, anecdotal evidence. You said about the moon, why when one person looks at it from one location, they see it in a different orientation than another person sees it in another. It's real simple, and you can experiment with this yourself at home. You can put a little picture up on the top of your ceiling. Just put it right up on your ceiling. Go over to the one in the wall, turn around, look at that picture. go over to this other wall adjacent to it and look up at the same picture. The orientation of it is going to be different. Your house didn't turn into a sphere. You didn't gain any convexity to your floor. You just changed the orientation at which you were viewing the same object that was fixed in a position. So that's not really anything either. That's why I say, and you said something about the constellations in the south can't be viewed in the north, and the constellations in the north cannot be viewed in the south. That's absolutely right. And that's all due to a matter of perspective. Now, the latitude lines on all of our navigation were devised a long time ago based on elevation view angles to Polaris. Once you get to 90 degrees, which is right there at the equator, the North Star is now, its elevation due to your location has dropped down into the horizon. Anything south of that, you're not going to be seeing it anymore. It's the same thing as if you were in like a great big huge warehouse. Let's say we had a warehouse that was 5 miles by 5 miles square, has a 15-foot ceiling, and there's lights in the ceiling. And we're standing in the center. When we go toward the edge of the warehouse, that center light is going to start to drop into the horizon. And what's better yet is we're going to start seeing lights in the ceiling that we couldn't see when we were under the center light, because they too, from the position of the center light, were too low in the horizon for us to see because of where we're at. The assumption that these things are great magnitudes away and of great magnitudes of size are basically that, assumptions. And they're based off of a calculation called the astronomical unit. The astronomical unit is, of course, the distance they calculated the Earth to be from the sun. Well, that too used a great deal of assumptions and has been changed from by a factor of 90 million since Copernicus. So there were a great deal of assumptions made in the calculation to the distance to the sun as well. We just take these things for granted because our education system tells us this. That's basically all we've really got. And so what it comes down to really is that it's a lot of stories repeated and reinforced into your mind. Now, you also have to understand why you were trained and programmed to ridicule or not accept flat Earth. Each generation that goes through this education system is told that they are much brighter and smarter than the generation that came before them. This is a thing that they keep because of this constant progression that they want to tout, which isn't true at all. So they push this idea to begin with, and then they hit you with a story, and I'm sure you remember one. Back in the old days before Columbus, people thought the Earth was flat, kids, and they thought they would sail off the edge. And a lot of Globers still use that picture of a sailboat falling off into space over a waterfall. I'm sure you've seen it. So you were taught that that's stupid by a figure that your perception was guided to perceive as an authority on knowledge. And when you realize that that person is telling you a story that they were told the same way they were told it for the same purpose.
They have a label as a teacher.
So that's You can't really get into these constellations. There's no proof of their distances. People always want to say astronomy is science. Astronomy is not science. Astronomy is observations of repeating cycles. They don't make predictions, they make postdictions based on repeating cycles. Now, when it comes to the eclipse, there again, another assumption that the shadow of the Earth is crossing the moon. Well, there's no proof of that. And secondly, the ratios of shadows between a lunar eclipse and a solar eclipse just don't add up. Nowhere ever does an object leave a shadow smaller than itself on anything. It doesn't happen. That's just not how light works. If you ran out the ratios, and I have worked out the ratios, we had an eclipse that came across the United States that left in a shadow path of approximately 70 miles wide. This is coming from an object that's supposedly 237,000 miles away. And what do they say it is? 136,000 miles in diameter? Something like that. Anyway, I've got the numbers. I ran the ratios. I ran the shadow ratios. So if the moon, using the same light source, gave me a shadow only 70 miles wide, that means that the Earth, using the same light source, given its diameter, would only leave a shadow about 10% the size of the moon and would just appear as a little black dot going across the moon. It would never shrink down to be even match the size of the moon. It would never shrink to that, because a shadow is never, ever smaller than the object that is casting it. Flights in the Great Circle. Okay, did you ever wonder why there is no Great Circle south? And the Great Circle can only be shown on the highly distorted Mercator projection map. Flight times, again, are not really a good proof because of the fact that you don't really have, you have an airspeed indicator on an aircraft. We can agree on that. However, if an airplane is using a tailwind, which there are very strong tailwinds, jet streams and trade winds are pretty fast. And if you've got that tailwind, you can just go ahead and add that speed to your airspeed, making the plane actually going much faster than its airspeed indicator would say. Also, calculations of distances across the oceans are calculations based on observations and not physical measurements such as those that are on the land. You can't really survey the ocean. You can't put an odometer on a boat. It has to be calculated by observation. So these distances that we're given, you would have to verify these distances as actual. Because let's face it, we've already been told a pack of shit. So how do I know that we go with that? So maps and flight times, shit, out. We're not even going to use that crap. So let's see, what else did we have here? I had something else with this was circumnavigation. Circumnavigation. If I go up to the end of my street, I make a right-hand turn. Then I go up to the next street and make a right-hand turn. One more time, make a right-hand turn. Then just one more time. You know what happens? I end up where I started. Is my neighborhood a sphere? No, I went around in a circle. East and west are counterclockwise and clockwise circles. North and south are merely towards the center and away from the center. Without a compass, do reckoning any direction on Earth. If you dead reckon that direction, you will end up going south. This is why you constantly have to correct while you're using a compass to keep north at north so you can stay on direction. So we're looking for a circumnavigation, an actual circumnavigation, not some claim by a Mason who went into Antarctica a little bit, turned around and came back the hell out. I'm talking about going along the same meridian and coming out on the same meridian on the other side. There's nobody ever done that. And just conveniently, it's next to near impossible to do it because of all the restrictions that have been put in place since 1958. So that's not actually anything of it. Now, when we were getting into the space thing, and I did say the thing that we are contained, there is no way to have a volume of any gas without containment. Gravity, even if it did exist, has absolutely no effect on the behavior of gases. None whatsoever. And until someone can actually demonstrate a volume of gas, a specific volume of gas, without containment, this remains a physical law. That's it. I think I touched on every one of your points. Did I miss anything?
Yeah, thanks for that. Very interesting. There are a few things that you mentioned there that I hadn't heard before on the flat Earth.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, if I may just come back on a few things and maybe just explore a couple of things. I think in general, if I may summarize it, I think that it's more or less saying that yes, okay, what I've said may explain a globe Earth, but hang on a minute, it also works on a flat Earth. I think that's a lot of your points are in that sort of theme.
Well, some of them, like we discussed before, like the perspective of the horizon, we've already shown, and this has been shown on CAD too. Yeah. This has been shown on CAD using actual size, right? The actual sizes in CAD space, computer aided drafting. You can go into 3D and you can make, astronomically huge things, and they show up on the screen and do the actual everything you need to do. So anyways, this thing has been done with an extending plane as well as a sphere, given the amount of that we're told it is. 24,900 something. Anyway, they ran that in there and then did an elevation test on it. Okay, and once you reach to a certain altitude, you start to see the convexity and the horizon drop relative to eye level. We don't ever see that. And the problem with getting to space and taking a photograph of the Earth and flying out and sending probes out incomprehensible distances and getting photographs back from them. How do they get out of here in order to do that?
Well, you're asking me, how did they take a photograph from space?
Yeah, how do they get to space?
Well, they got
is what we're told.
Yeah, well, they got to space by rocket fuel. And
right.
Although there's no oxygen in space, and I've seen some flat earthers say, "Well, how does it combust then?" But
well, I'm not worried about all that. I'm worried about
the oxygen in liquid form.
Get out of the Earth system. How did they get out of the Earth system? Look, there's only 3 types of thermodynamic systems, right? There's an open system, there's a closed system, and you have an isolated system. And an isolated system is so far, it's theoretical. Okay. The closest we have to that is like some of these Yeti coolers where you can keep ice, will stay in it for like a week, but it eventually melts. So it's not a true isolated thermodynamic system. It's
But
just a very efficient closed system.
What do you mean by isolated system? I'm struggling to understand.
Okay, isolated system means that neither energy nor matter can pass between systems. Okay, nothing can escape the isolated system at all, not energy, not matter. In a closed system, energy can transfer, but matter cannot. In an open system, matter and energy are both free to travel back and forth.
And what are you saying the Earth is?
It has to be a closed system or we wouldn't be having this conversation.
Right, okay. At one point, maybe it's topical to bring on the point about the containment, because I have seen this argument before. I'm not sure if it's quite the argument you were running, but the idea that you can't have the vacuum of space and then a gas in the form of an atmosphere right next to each other, because that doesn't work. Things move. Things normally move from matter to vacuum, don't they, to equalize?
Assuming that space is indeed a vacuum or very low pressure system, that is correct. Yes.
But so the scientific explanation against that is that the density of the air, it doesn't form a fixed boundary between air and then no air. It's very gradual because of gravity. So when you go up, the air pressure goes down because as you travel upwards, there's less and less air. The density becomes less and less and less. And so there isn't a boundary where you've got air and then no air.
The pressure is less, yes. The pressure is less, and the pressure is less due to factors such as temperature, dispersal area, and composition of mixture. In other words, Dalton's law, which says that the sum pressure of a mixture is comprised of the individual pressures of each of the elements of that mixture. Okay.
Yeah, so that's what pressure is. Pressure is
right.
The amount,
you cannot have pressure though without containment, not of a gas. It won't have pressure.
Well, you've got the gravitational pull pulling it down.
Yeah, gravity,
that's stopping it.
Like I said, gravity, if it exists, has never been proven or shown to have any effect on gases. None.
Okay.
For instance, let me walk you through a little short thought experiment. Okay.
Sure.
So if I had a box right here that's sealed up, and let's say I got a remote control that'll open that box up, right? And I'm out here, I just close the box and I seal it. The pressure inside of that box is exactly the same as it is outside of the box, right? Now I place it into a vacuum chamber and I reduce the pressure in the vacuum chamber to as far limit as it will go. Now we have to agree that the vacuum chamber, the box, the air I put in the box and the air around everyone is all being held to the earth by gravity. So I place the box with the air in it, which is being held by gravity, into the vacuum chamber and I reduce it down. Then I hit the remote and open the box. Will gravity keep the air in the box?
No.
Why?
Because the force isn't large enough.
Well, what's it take to have a large enough force?
It won't, because the difference in pressure between the gas inside the box,
right,
and the near vacuum outside the box is so great that the air will rush out of the box into the.
Will it be more concentrated though after it does that? Will it be more concentrated in the box and in the bottom of the vacuum chamber than it is up toward the top? Or will it distribute equally?
Well, it won't start equally, but it will eventually. That's where it will end up. It will stabilize until it's so that the pressure is as equal as possible. I mean, the reality is that it won't be exactly equal because of gravity, but the difference between the pressure at the bottom of the room and the top of the room is so slight that it's not measurable. You only measure differences in pressure over large, so if you travel 200 meters above sea level, there'll be a noticeable difference in pressure.
Okay,
Even
well,
then, not a huge difference.
so your hypothesis is that gravity is creating a gradient that feathers off into space.
That's correct.
Okay. Are there any experiments that prove that gravity has any effect on a gas?
Yes,
What?
because you can send a helium balloon up.
That's
And it
yeah.
will
Hold on.
it will eventually pop because of the pressure. The pressure decreases as the higher it goes.
No, it doesn't always pop. Doesn't always pop. There's thousands of weather balloons up there every day, all over the place, way up. You can't see them. They don't pop.
Well, yeah, but
They go up
there's
and retrieve them. They go up and retrieve them. What
I'm not
happens
talking about
is
weather balloons.
the balloon with the helium in it, like I stated earlier,
Yeah.
it's in a state of disequilibrium. When it's all trapped inside that thing, it's in a state of disequilibrium with the medium outside.
Sure. Well, actually,
it wants to seek equilibrium.
Yeah.
Now, the balloon will eventually stop. It won't go any higher. And the reason being is because it has now achieved neutral buoyancy. It has now achieved equilibrium.
But it
That's
most
as high as it'll go.
likely will pop if it's made of.
Well, yeah, it will. So will any balloon. A regular blow air in a balloon and take it up to a high altitude, it'll pop. When I lived in California, there was this store. They got their order of chips, and what had happened was, because of a wreck or something, the truck bringing it took a mountain pass into the Sierras to bring the chips to the store. And when they got there and opened the boxes, damn near every one of those potato chip bags, you guys call them crisps, every one of those bags had popped open. The sodas were so pressurized it wasn't even funny, man. Half of them had burst. So yeah, it's just a matter of equalization.
Yeah, I think we can agree on that. I wanted to bring you back to the vacuum tube, something you said earlier, if I may explore that with you. So I think what you're getting at is the explanation I've seen, which is that gravity doesn't exist. It's just buoyancy and density. And for example, for the same reason that a piece of wood floats on water and it doesn't sink to the bottom.
Some would, most would, not all would.
Yeah, most would, yeah. The only problem with that is what I would say is that how do the molecules know which way is down without gravity? Can you answer that?
It's nothing more than equilibrium. Everything is wanting to seek equilibrium. Everything is under is going through states of entropy.
I've got a mouse in my hand, and if I drop this mouse, it's going to fall. Okay.
Right.
So what makes it fall without gravity? Are you saying it's because the mouse is heavier than the air?
The mouse per volume is denser than the air. The whole thing. Okay, so the weight. What is weight? Weight is nothing more than a quantification of the relative density of an object within a given medium.
But then why down and not up? That's what I'm asking.
Because that's the set condition. The set condition is the densest area of the Earth system is down.
But you do realize that on a spherical model, down is different for Australia.
Right. I do understand that. Yes.
Yeah. So down is always relative to the surface of the Earth, isn't it?
Well, no, not really, because we can use down as a reference for plumb. Okay, by using an object that is much denser by volume than the medium, called a plumb bob. And that plumb bob will be 90 degrees perpendicular to level. Level is a straight line.
But I'm still not clear on how the molecules in this mouse know which way is down.
They don't have to. They're in a state of disequilibrium. You gave it energy when you lifted it to a state of disequilibrium. You put it to a state of potential energy. When you released it, that energy was expended seeking equilibrium.
You've just described gravity very neatly.
No, not at all, because all I have to do is change the medium and I can change what that thing does.
Now,
Right?
I think,
For instance, I drop a steel ball, it goes right to the ground. I drop a steel ball in mercury, it goes up. Why? Because I increase the density per volume of the medium to a state where it was greater than the object itself.
yeah, and that's, I think, why you went to the vacuum tube, because that is often used as a way to debunk that theory. Because
It doesn't debunk it, though.
if you remove all the air from it,
You don't remove all the air from it.
down.
You don't remove all the air from it.
You can't remove all of it.
Remove all the air from it.
You can remove almost all of the air from it.
No, you can't. You can remove a great deal of it, but you're never going to put something in an environment where it is absolutely medium free. There is no such thing. It's just very low pressure. So once again, all you've done is change the ratio between the medium and the object.
Yeah, the only other thing I wanted to pick you up on was on this idea of the circumnavigation, because you described it as, I thought, quite eloquently, actually, the idea that if you go up one street and then turn right and then you turn enough times and you come back where you started.
Right.
But the only problem with that is that these people that circumnavigate the globe had compasses, and it showed them that they were going continually in the same direction. Whereas if, on your analogy,
only if they kept north in the same position. Listen, they don't sail in straight lines. Okay, ships don't sail, not in those days with Magellan. They weren't sailing in straight lines. They have to tack in order to maintain a direction. What that consists of is a zigzagging. What they had to do is keep, if they were going west, you have to keep north to your port side. That's all. That's how you know you're going west. And if you're going in a circle, now, if you were to take a landmark, say he could see like thousands of miles, which I don't think he could, but he said, okay, that's in my compass is west. And he dead reckoned and just started going west like that. Well, eventually he's going to start to go south because he's coming out of the circle. East and west are nothing more than clockwise and counterclockwise circles around the plane, using the north as the center hub of your circumnavigation. North and south are lines. Those are lines going in and out.
They'd have to have got lost, basically, on your
they would, yes, absolutely got lost. If they would have dead reckoned, they would have absolutely got lost 100%. They have to continuously keep north to their port side in order to know that they are going west. Which
I didn't quite understand your time zone point. You were saying that there were more time zones in the southern hemisphere, and it's lost me on that slightly.
Yeah, just wondering why that would be. Why wouldn't there just be 24 consistent time zones around the Earth?
Yeah, but isn't that just because time zones are set by us humans and they're arbitrary? And
there's less people in the south than there is in the north. There's less land mass in the south than there is in the north.
Yeah, but nonetheless, it's still, time zones are set by humans.
Yeah,
they're not a natural phenomena. There's
just
arbitrarily
they kind of are. They kind of are, because it's based on the zenith of the sun in a certain location. Used to be back in the day, before the Industrial Revolution, and for a while afterwards, because they would say it's such and such Eastern time, and they would give you another number for local time. And local time in many cities was derived not from where their time zone was, but based off of the zenith of the sun when it was noon. And that was considered local time. I still remember back when I was a kid, they announced local time. There were people that still went by that. One of the biggest things they've done in the last century and a half or so is with this industrial revolution, is they've enslaved people with a dial. They really have. And it's really evident. You can ask somebody if they're hungry, and the first thing they'll do is look to see what time it is. And I'm like, wait a minute. I didn't ask you what time it was. I asked you if you were hungry. Hungry is a feeling, not a time. Or ask them if they're tired. They'll look to see what time it is. That's how enslaved by the clock we are. We base everything off it now.
I only wanted to pick up two more things, if I may. So, on the issue of the shadow, I do challenge what you say about a shadow. An object can't cast a shadow smaller than itself, because we do that does actually happen, and in fact, that happens with the sun. When the sun's higher up, it casts a smaller shadow than it does. You get much longer shadows, don't you, when the sun sets?
Yeah.
So I wasn't quite sure about that argument for the.
Well, it doesn't never make one smaller than the object that's casting it. If you're talking about a shadow of something that's right under the direct sun, well, your shadow is directly beneath you. And the profile of that shadow is not any smaller than you.
But I think your argument was that I think you accept that during the lunar eclipse, there is a shadow cast on the moon, and
Something
it is spherical.
happens. It might be a shadow. I don't know.
It isn't the most consistent, isn't the most likely.
As far as I know, it could be a physical dark object. I don't know. We don't even know what the moon actually is. I know what we're told it is, but we don't really know what it is.
But that's not a great. That's not with respect to great argument. That's simply saying, well, I don't know. It might not be that. Rather than
what I'm saying is it most likely is not that, based on shadow ratios and the fact that it's not proven that it's the shadow of the earth. Here's a problem that we have with that too, man, especially during a solar eclipse. Now we get light from the moon that we're told is reflected by the sun, right? And I can go outside on a full moon and I can read a newspaper without any aid. No aid. I can read that newspaper right there, plain as day, right?
So why isn't it the sun?
Wait a second. Why is it that when the sun is directly behind the moon, a much larger object still illuminating a great deal of the earth, which is mostly water, reflective water, why is there no moonshine? Why is there no shine of the earth onto the moon? Why is there no light being reflected back at the moon from the earth? That's kind of weird.
Well, I think it is.
If a dusty rock can reflect light from an object 93 million miles away and direct it back to the earth with the intensity bright enough for me to read a book, then surely a sphere that's 3/4 or more water would reflect that same sunlight back to the dusty gray ball and illuminate it at least a little bit, wouldn't it?
Well, how do you know it doesn't?
Because we don't observe that.
Well, we wouldn't. We would unless we were on the moon.
No, I'm talking about looking at the moon.
The moon's made
should be enough reflected light from the highly reflective Earth. Let's not forget, they say they can see Earth all the way from Saturn's rings, right? So this means that it's got to be highly reflective.
But how's that an argument in favor of the flat Earth?
Well, I'm just saying, it's not. What it is, what it is an argument for is that I don't fully know that the objects that are causing the eclipses are every time the object that they tell me it is. Now, sometimes I believe it is the moon eclipsing the sun. Other times, not so sure.
Well,
Not
you
so
will
sure.
notice the moon. The moon is always at the opposite side of where the sun is relative. So when the sun set, and if you imagine where it should be if it's going under the Earth, the moon
Well,
will always be the opposite side. And how do you explain the phases of the moon on a
well,
flat
see,
Earth?
the Selenilian eclipse kind of blows that out of the water, and that was the linchpin for myself. The shadow approaches from the top of the moon.
Sorry, which shadow? Are you talking about the lunar phases?
Yeah, you're looking at a Selenilian eclipse of the moon. In other
But the,
words,
the lunar phases are not the Earth casting a shadow on
I
the moon.
don't know. No, not at all. The Earth is not, well, the Earth isn't casting a shadow on anything. See, the whole problem a lot of people have is getting their head out of this bullshit outer space thing that they've been given. It's not real.
So what do you say is up there? I mean, you've got your flat Earth, and then what have you got? Do you believe in the ice wall around it?
I've heard and seen pictures of it, and that sounds like it could be. Absolutely. I've seen a 1587 map of the world.
What's underneath the flat? There's a dome, is there on your?
Oh, I have no idea. No, but how would anybody know? We've never been able to dig any deeper than 7.9 miles deep. So I don't know. There again, I don't know what's under it or if there's anything under it at all. What I do know and what I can prove is that there is a level topographical plane. That's obvious. And that it must be contained in order to have a dynamic fluid pressure system such as we have. There is absolutely no other way to have a volume of air, a volume of any gas without some kind of a container. There's no way. And as far as a gradient, I can take a pressurized cylinder of a gas and I can cool one end and heat the other end, and there will be a gradient inside of that pressure cylinder. So the gradient, everybody loves to point to, oh, there's a pressure gradient. The antecedent of gradient is pressure, and the antecedent of pressure is containment. There is no other way to do it. Ask your mechanic if pressure needs containment. Just ask your mechanic, he'll know. But so there's that right there. So this crap about being something floating in a void or any other thing, what lies beyond the sky as I observe it, it's anybody's guess. I don't know. But for people to have come out in an attempt over my mind to tell me through flim flam and pseudoscience that they know concretely all this crap that I know is physically impossible. For instance, the sun being a giant ball of hydrogen gas that collected together and became so gravitational that it collapsed in on itself and became nuclear fusion. Does anybody realize how preposterous of a story that is? To believe that a gas could magically collect together without a container, just magically collect together, and then somehow decide against the properties of all gas molecules to become bonded to one another in order to form a mass.
I understand the skepticism towards it. It's counterintuitive.
Well, that's not skepticism.
Well,
that's physical impossibilities, man.
Okay, it's skepticism is the wrong word. It's counterintuitive. I'll give you that, because we've evolved from animals that are intended to survive. So we interpret things in a certain way.
Wait.
So it's counterintuitive, but in space you don't have any forces acting on the molecules other than.
It's the story in Narnia. There's a lion that talks and acts like Jesus. These are stories.
Yeah, but in order to understand that in order to know that the story is false, you need to understand the story. So the yeah, the story as you put it is that in space there are no other forces acting on the gas molecules other than the forces of gravity.
There would be no forces on it. What forces would act on a gas? There are none.
Well,
There are none.
it is actually debated in physics whether gravity is a force technically or not, because
Well, they
there are
say it creates a force. Look, this is why. Listen,
yeah.
let me just give you a little brief rundown on gravity. Newtonian gravity was shit canned 109 years ago, I think, when Einstein came out with his theory of relativity. Now it's the bending of space time.
Yeah.
Okay. So their whole thing fell apart because their observations of what their story of the universe doing wasn't working out. It wasn't working out. Somehow their magic gravity just wasn't doing what they thought gravity should do. Because after all, look at their math. How could they be wrong? So rather than admit that they were wrong, they invented something called dark matter. Something that's never been proven to exist, just pulled out of Uranus, really, to make the calculations fit.
Yeah, you're
I
actually
don't
right.
know who can say that
Right.
that is science at all. It's not. It's pseudoscience.
Yeah. I actually agree with you there, because I mean, sometimes science does do that. It kind of knows something is wrong with the theory, or the theory is incomplete.
Oh,
And what they'll do sometimes is they will posit something that, well, it would work if there was this stuff that we couldn't see called dark matter, because the maths don't add up and there's too much. Either there's too much stuff in the universe or there isn't quite enough. And sometimes what happens is, as science develops, they then discover something else through observation and theory and testing that fits and explains, well, actually, we were wrong about dark matter, and actually it's something else. It's something, and if that dark matter started with Einstein putting in a constant, he put a
but you understand that it's all pseudoscience because it is all things that cannot be tested.
Sure. Well,
All
actually,
they can do is
yeah.
make observations and then try to make up a story that fits their observations. And most often, what they've done is make up a story to go along with their observations to fit their narrative.
But you're kind of right, because I mean that's how scientific theories develop. There is a theory, and then they try to test the theory with observation. And if observation supports the theory, then that reinforces the theory.
Well, observation alone is not a test. Observation alone is not a test. Observation leads to the test. Post-dicting something is not a prediction. Okay, we're not the Psychic Friends Network.
It's the current scientific method.
But that's not science. That's my point. It's not science.
So they have made discoveries using this. I mean, actually, I got it slightly wrong. It's not the cosmological constant wasn't dark matter. It was dark energy, which is something slightly different. But Einstein actually, when he was doing his equations, had to put in this constant, which he called the cosmological constant, to balance out. Now, what the latest theories are that the cosmological constant actually reflects something called dark energy, which is the stuff that's pushing the universe apart. Because
it's not expanding apart, because now scientists have come out and said that the red shift blue shift is bullshit.
Well, they observe the red shift, don't they?
We don't see any expansion going on. We've never seen stars parallax one another. Never have we ever witnessed stars parallax one another. In fact, we don't have any evidence that they're any further away from each other, from us.
But they won't parallax each other because that's not how the expansion works. It's the space itself that's expanding, not
right,
the
which would indicate that the objects themselves would have to expand away from one another. and we've
Yeah.
never witnessed that. That's not been witnessed, recorded.
We don't witness it with our eyes, but they witness it through the red shift. So every
What I just tell you about the red shift, blue shift is bullshit. They've come out. Mainstream science has already said that that is bullshit.
all right. One more thing I just wanted to pick up, which is on your flat Earth model, how do you explain the seasons, the different amounts of daylight versus night throughout the year,
Oh,
and the different
sure.
temperatures? Why is it colder in the North Pole than it is on the equator and everything
Okay.
else?
Yeah. Real simple. Okay. As the sun circuits above the Earth, let's start it right out at the equator. Okay. This is where we're starting at, middle of the year. The sun is migrating in a spiral pattern northward until it finally progresses 6 months later in June, the Tropic of Cancer, where it remains for a short period, and we have the longest day of the year in the north. The sun then begins its progression south again until it reaches the equator. That's the equinox. There we go, right there. 3 months after that, we're coming up on December, it reaches the Tropic of Capricorn, where it remains for a short period before it starts its progression migrating back toward the north. 3 months later, again, we have another equinox over the equator. And then 3 months after that, it's north and hits Cancer. Now, these tropics were named very long time ago, 2 ages ago. Because if they were named today, you would have Sagittarius and Gemini. That would be the names of the two tropics. So technically, that's what they are today. And that's it. If you think about a 33 RPM record, okay, and the stylus, instead of the record spinning, the stylus going around. Just imagine it doing it the opposite thing. The song never gets any faster, and it never gets any slower, even though the centripetal speed of the record does increase and decrease as you move to and from the center of the record. Okay?
Right, but wouldn't the sun appear smaller at different times of the year, depending on how far it is from you?
Sometimes it does. Sometimes it absolutely does. We have to also look at atmospheric magnification that takes place because we're looking at it lower in the sky. We're looking through a thicker layer of moisture, which of course will magnify and diffract. On clearer days, I have indeed in December seen the sun appear much smaller than it does in the middle of June. But once again, if something is already large and far away from you, you're not going to see a lot of change in angular perspective when I move it toward and away from you. I've done a demonstration on this show with a ball where I do it right at the camera here, and you can see a angular resolution change, but then I move back across the room and I do the same movement toward you, and you don't detect as much, if any, angular resolution change in what I bring toward you and away from you.
What force is moving the sun? And if the sun isn't a ball of gas under a nuclear fusion, then what's powering it?
I have absolutely no idea. It does appear to be electric in nature, from what I can recollect. It behaves more as, I believe, like I think it has more of an electrical function than it does an actual, like they say, a fire or burning type of function to it. I'm also looking into some ideas that it might actually work with the heating on the Earth, much like magnetic induction does. We don't know what lies below 7 almost 8 miles deep. And I came to the idea one day when I was using my induction burner. I have a thing I can cook on, that it doesn't get hot. It makes the pan get hot because of magnetic induction, right? And I was thinking, huh. And as I move this thing away, the intensity decreases. It's interesting. And I started thinking about that. And I lived out in California for a while, right at the entrance of Death Valley. And I've been to the lowest point below sea level, 285 feet below sea level. And baby, I'll tell you what, it's hot there all year long, man. It's known as the hottest place on earth. But then I can drive about an hour and a half away from there and go up to 8,000 feet elevation at the Mount Whitney portal. And it's about 60, 70 degrees, or less, depending on the time of year. In the wintertime, it's colder than shit. I still go down there to Badwater, and it's hotter blazes down there. So I got to that. It's just something I'm playing around with in my head. What is the sun? I don't know. I really don't. I'd like to know. That'd be great. What it's not the thing that they're telling us. I can tell you that now.
But so that brings me on to the next question: is what is the motive behind inventing all this stuff?
Well, I think there's several motives. I think that there's multifaceted control.
By the way, sorry, just to add one more thing. By the way, do you think that they do know what it is, but don't want to tell us? Or is it like you, they don't know and they've just made it up?
No, I think at the very echelons of the top, and maybe even in top tiers of the scientific community, they absolutely 100% know. But it's not profitable to know that. Okay? If I'm a physicist and I realize that the earth is flat and then I start publishing papers on it, they're not even going to get looked at because of the peer review method. Okay, they're not even going to get looked at. Not only are they not going to get looked at, I'm going to be drummed out of the community of scientists. And I call it that, scientism, because that's what it's come down to. It's a religion. It's all about publishing papers and grants. That's it. Science favors whoever funds them, unfortunately. So science has become not science anymore.
Well, I would say it's to do with the scientific method. So if you come up with a theory, there's nothing to stop you doing that, but you have to then back it up with observations to support the theory. So
we're doing that every day. We do that every day.
If you had a brilliant theory for how it worked and had some experiments to suggest that we're completely aligned with it.
Are you familiar with Austin Whitsitt? Are you familiar with Austin Whitsitt?
I'm not.
You're not? Okay, look up his channel. If one of my moderators could put the link in the chat, that would be really cool. Or, but yeah, the Austin Whitsitt, he's really gone in depth of this, man. I've seen him obliterate modern physicists on some of these theories, and it's amazing. The man knows what he's talking about. You can find his channel on YouTube. It's called Whitsitt Gets It. Let me see if I can find it real quick, and I'll give you a link to it. Oh, no. But yeah, so yeah, experiments and things like that are being done. However, as I said before, the whole scientific community is controlled by academia. So as you were saying, there's what's the motive? All right, well, first off, I get asked that a lot. And I give the same answer. It's multifaceted. There are many advantages to hiding this from you. One, first and foremost, being the linchpin to all of the rest of the deceptions that we are placed under. And here is a link to Whitsitt Gets It. I'm going to put it in the regular chat. And Kent, if you look over on stupid little notifications, there we go. Over on the right-hand side of your screen, you'll see a thing that says private chat. And I'm putting a clickable link in that you can click on.
Right. Oh yeah, that's in the what it's called now, the broadcast, the StreamYard thing.
I just put it in see the private chat on the stream, on the StreamYard thing. A little one You got it? Okay, cool, cool,
I
cool.
have got it. Thank you.
Okay, cool. But yeah, so to illustrate your point, yeah, there are a lot of people doing these experiments and things. Doing things with Van de Graaff generators that are quite amazing as well, showing the fundamental electrostatic nature of our world, which is really quite interesting. Let's see, where was I going? I was going on something else you asked about. I forgot what was your other part of your question, my friend?
I think I was asking about the sun. What powers it? What moves
Oh,
it?
yeah. So, oh yeah, and what would the motive be? My bad. Okay, yeah. So the motive, phew, right? Okay, so there's several that could be done. Several. Feel free to speculate. My opinion is to, one, hide resources, two, to hide land, three, to hide the fact that we are a creation and that we have purpose and we're not an infinitesimally small, unnoticeable speck of nothing in a vast void. This is designed to dehumanize you and make you feel hopeless. Geez, control of your mind. I mean, let's face it, if I can make you believe that you are a monkey living on a spinning water ball in space, shit, I can tell you anything, right? So there's several motives, but what's important about it is this. If I ran across the body, you and I were out one day, and we're detectives. We get a call and we go to this place, and there's a guy laying on the floor, face down, several stab wounds in his back, and the knife is still sticking out of his back. We're going, okay, well, I think this was a murder. I think we can pretty well conclude that there was a murder committed, right? All right. And then somebody says, well, what's the motive? And I says, well, I don't know what the motive would be, really. We haven't determined that yet. But, you know, and then the guy says, well, then how do you know he was murdered? Well, wait a second. We've established that he's murdered. Okay, there's no doubt that a murder took place, whether I know the motive for it or not. The murder still took place. So the same thing is with this. I don't really have to know the motive in order to know that I've been lied to. That's now, like I said, you could the reasons could be endless. You could come up with a multifaceted, dynamic reasons why. I can say that I think there is something fishy. I think there's something special about Antarctica. I think it's odd that the UN flag not only depicts the azimuthal equidistant map, but also doesn't have Antarctica on it. And in fact, in place of Antarctica is a wreath of Apollo. Now, the wreath of Apollo, you probably recognize from the Roman Caesars wearing. It's a crown, it's a symbol of power. Why would Antarctica be depicted with a symbol of power? And why do high level dignitaries go down there? For apparently no freaking reason. We had the Pope of the Vatican go to Antarctica, as well as the Eastern Orthodox Pope went to Antarctica. And they spoke for the first time in 500 years. Why Antarctica? John Kerry, famous American politician, was running for president even. On election night, which is like the Super Bowl for these assholes, he goes to Antarctica. Why? What is so special about Antarctica? Why is there a treaty so restrictive to protect Antarctica? So protect Antarctica. What's the big mystery? Or is it a distraction to keep me focused on it so I don't worry about what's in the north, which I think is equally as important? Both areas are restricted. Both areas are off limits to you. Why would the world organizations impose a civilian flight height limit of 50,000 feet? These are questions that need to be answered, man. But they're very sus. Do they mean anything? No, but they point in a direction, don't they? So that's what I go. And once again, and I can't reiterate this enough. Looking at lights in the sky is no indication of the condition of where you view them from. In other words, you have light bulbs in your ceiling. You can look at them real close and they're round. They're bulb shaped. Does that mean that your floor and your house is bulb shaped too? No. That's just a reaffirmation of a consequence, that belief. So looking at the sky is not an indication of anything about the ground. What would actually prove a globular Earth would be a physical measurement of curvature matching a globe, the diameter we are given. That's it.
Oh, okay, thanks. Well, I think I've covered all my points. I don't know what your format is from here on. Do you do questions, or what do you usually do?
Yeah, we just pretty much, if you've got any questions, I pretty much covered everything I need to as far as this is concerned. If there's anybody in the chat that would has a question for Kent or myself, go ahead and put it in there. Be sure and tag my name so that I can see that it's there, and we'll see if we can answer it. If we don't get anything from that, I would imagine this has been a pretty pleasant discussion. I think we kept it cordial, and I think we actually broke history in the respect of a globe Earth, flat Earth discussion. Because never once did either party get heated, start calling names, anything. And I got to say, Ken, congrats. That's great. Welcome, and you're welcome back anytime.
Thanks so much.
Sub to my channel. Most of the evenings when I do my show, I put a link for to come up on the show. Anybody can come up as long as they observe conversational decorum, like I said. And you're free to pop on and join anytime, Ken. Anytime.
Thank you.
Okay, so somebody said, is there gravity at the center of a globe?
Is that a question for me or for you?
Yeah, I would imagine so, yeah.
For me. That's quite a good question. I think I'm not an expert in this area by any means, but I saw a couple of YouTube videos about this. And I think the theory is that if you're in the absolute center of the Earth, then you would experience potentially zero gravity in the sense that you would be pulled equally in all directions. But the pressure at the center of the Earth would be so great that you would be crushed well before you got there, and you wouldn't live to conduct the experiment, which is a helpful.
Well, let's suppose I dug a hole, right, directly straight. If this were possible, I dig it straight through the globe, okay, and then I drop a hammer down in there. Let's suppose it's a titanium special hammer that can't be crushed. Okay, this thing is like it's Thor's hammer. It's Thor's hammer, and I got him. I got him to lift it up for me and drop it in the hole. What's going to happen to it? Is it going to go to the center and just hang out there?
It's a good question. I suppose it would accelerate until it reached the center, and then I suppose it might reach a state of equilibrium once it reaches there, because it can't fall upwards when it passes the center. Well, that's my guess. I'd have to look into it, but that would be my guess.
True Earth Cherry Popper said, Sovereign, I'd like to say that Kent is far too reasonable to be a glober.
Thank you so much.
So DJ637 asks, Kent, what's your #1 proof of a globe? Number one, if you had to like say, okay, I got to give my number one top proof, that's all I can use, which would it be?
Yeah, that is a tough one. I would have to say it would probably be the photographs. I know that might be a slightly unpopular answer, but you can't beat what you can see with your eyes, right? So, and I haven't seen any photographs of the flat Earth, so I would say that's probably the number one. Although there are probably quite a few other close ones as well.
Well, I'd have to say that every photograph taken on Earth is of a flat Earth. The reason that you cannot get a photograph encompassing the entire Earth is because the altitude necessary to get a photograph such as that is impossible. The best we can do is video from high altitude balloons, and they don't seem to be depicting any curvature. Let's see who else we got. Earth sent, Earth fixed coordinate system, brother. Let's see. Does he think the tides are caused by the moon or more of a breathing of the Earth?
Yeah, we didn't cover the tides, did we?
No,
I mean, that is.
I say tides have nothing to do with shit when it comes to the condition of the Earth.
What's your explanation then, Sov, for why the tides happen?
I
Why you
don't
have
have
two
any
tides
more-
a day?
I have theories. I think that it may be very much like a any kind of a terrarium or a pool filtration system that activates twice a day. Something along those lines. It could be. I don't know for sure. What I do know is that it's not gravity of the moon pulling on millions and millions and millions of tons of seawater, yet leaving everything else undisturbed. I just can't see that happening. You would at the very least see some kind of a mist rising up off of the ocean and headed up into the air towards the moon, not the water bulging as though it were some kind of a gelatinous mass, which it's not. It's a liquid. But also, I was thinking that one time, to get a bunch of people at a Trump rally, right? There's a lot of people there. And, your blood composition isn't much different than that of seawater. And, see if that moon starts pulling them all toward it and shit, while they're trying to stand there listening to Donald Trump. But I don't think that's happening. So it's kind of along those same lines. I have no idea what causes the tides. They say you can tell by the lunar cycle and blah 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 blah. And I'm like, yeah, okay. Well, here's a little story. I got a little red car that goes by my house every day, Monday through Saturday. Every day, a little red car, same time, goes by my house. Shortly after that, the mail arrives. So I conclude from that observation that red car going by causes my mail to show up. Is that a logical conclusion? No, not a bit. Not a bit. I mean, just so happens that guy's on his way to work every day and he leaves just before my mail comes. That's all. So correlation and effect like that is like a really bad looking, bad way to go with this. Sovereign Soul, why is flat Earth? Oh, why do you think that they censor and shadow ban flat Earth material from the internet? I mean, like on Facebook, YouTube, we are heavily shadow banned from producing content while, and I don't call them globers, I call them flat Earth hater channels like McToon and the rest of them. Their shit is highly promoted. If you did a search right now in YouTube for flat Earth, first ones they're going to give you Simon Dan, all the flat Earth haters. That's what they're going to give you and push to the top of the algorithm. Why do you suppose that they do that?
I think there is this drive, isn't there, against what they call misinformation, and that's going on Twitter and X now, and Facebook and LinkedIn. and so forth. So, I mean, I personally don't agree with it. I think if people want to, they can believe in whatever they want. And as
See,
long as
who
they do
gets
it,
to decide what's disinformation too? See, I
yeah, exactly.
I put this meme out several times now. And what it is, it shows somebody with some nippers going after their tire stem on their car. And the thing reads that there's a secret government tracking device in your automobile, and the antenna is located on the inside of your wheel. If you cut this off, they can't track you. How many times do you think they got censored or fact checked? Not once. Not once. Now, another theory that's out there that doesn't get fact checked, doesn't get censored, and that's hollow earth. They don't even pay no mind to that. They'll let you look at hollow earth shit all day long. Okay? They'll let you look at videos about Anunnaki Jew lizards who are coming from the Bureau to probe your butt all day long. That's not misinformation, right? But when we discuss the fact that the arguments given to, or the story we're given about where we live has been nothing but a lie. Oh my God, this is dangerous. So, you know, they say that the topic, they said it's dangerous. It's politically dangerous. How could flat earth be politically dangerous? See, that's what you, those are the things you got to look at, man. See if I got any more. Let's see. Does your guest believe in what? Does your guest believe in charging in the two Gaussian surfaces? Okay, he's asking you, do you believe that there is a downward flow of electric current due to Gaussian surfaces? In other words, the what the globe people call the ionosphere and the neutral Earth.
Well, I'm not sure I quite understand what that is in order to answer it.
That's fine. That's fine. Watch Witsit, and then you'll. I'm serious. You'll get this kill. You'll have to slow him down. Because, you know, I'm pretty good. I can listen to somebody talking, but Witsit, he'll come in there and go, pop, 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 pop. And I'm like, okay, wait the fuck, hold on, wait, what? And I'll go back and listen to it again, and I break it down. I'm like, yeah, gotcha, right, go ahead. But yeah, he's really a smart dude.
I mean, if it's a question about whether you can explain gravity through gravitation, through electromagnetic fields or electrostatic
electrostatic
fields. Yeah, maybe that's what the question is driving at. But I don't believe that. No, that could explain it. No, because you don't observe that. You observe a different phenomenon with gravity.
Well, this is where I go with this, and this is something that we've been kind of conditioned to, is always looking for a singular cause, when in fact it's most often a cocktail of several different things at once causing whatever the effect is. For instance, there's vodka like in a Long Island iced tea, right? But I don't have a Long Island iced tea until I add all the other ingredients to it, right? So it's kind of goes along that. And so I think that where as far as I see it, there is a measurable downward dielectric field of electrons. Okay, it's measurable. We can prove the attractiveness of that. Well, you do it yourself when if you've ever shook out a towel you just took out of the dryer and didn't use a static sheet, and instead of its tendency to want to fall to the floor, it wants to go and stick to your legs instead. You know, it still reacted with the medium around it. You just gave it a different vector by it being charged, or you being charged, whatever the case may be. So I can say that is, but I think it's a combination. That it's the combination of the relative density per volume of objects to the medium, as with the vector being set by the electrostatics, not the electrostatics itself being the cause, but it just basically giving everything a direction.
It does remind me of a flat Earth meme that I've seen kicking around. The idea that how can gravity be so weak that a butterfly can overcome it, but it sticks oceans down. I mean, before I sort of comment on it, what's your view, Solve, on that? Do you subscribe to that meme, or do you have a different view?
Yeah, I absolutely do, because it's all, like I said, it's medium dependent. Most insects, and not necessarily a butterfly, but like, a bumblebee, they're not really using their wings as an aerodynamic surface to fly. They're creating a electromagnetic field through vibrational resonance that allows them to levitate. Frequency, energy, and vibration. It's the fundamental makeup of everything, right? And what's amazing is they can fly right through a side wind with no deviation to their path. It's like they've created this field around them that they can float in. And then, of course, the electrostatic field that's built up from this is what causes them, when they land on the flowers, that's what causes all the pollen to start sticking to their legs. After a while, there won't be any more will stick to it. It's already as much as he can possibly get. And he uses that same frequency resonance to find his way back. I even suspect that there's a frequency vector code within that little dance that they give when they come back to tell the other bees where they found more flowers. Remarkable creatures, remarkable. Just so deep. That's a whole nother subject. So yeah, I'm pretty much
gravity is a very weak force. I mean, the idea that you can lift a ball up off the ground, you can defeat the whole of the Earth's power with it. But it operates over large distances, so it operates. It's the same force that's keeping planets in orbit around the sun, or the moon in orbit around the Earth. But the electromagnetic force is much stronger. It's what keeps all the molecules together. That's the electromagnetic force, with the exchange of electrons, and but it operates at much smaller distances. So you're talking about the distances between different atoms in the molecule. So the different forces have different strengths over different distances, and the strength between two celestial bodies at great distance would be a lot higher.
That's the theory. But there again, it holds at that. There again, it hinges on that magical duct tape called gravity, which nobody knows what it is. It's based off of a myth.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. It's the scientific community are finding it very difficult to. They can explain how it works. They can do equations to predict,
when it comes to, again,
why.
Well, when they're talking about objects in Narnia land, a place that violates the second law of thermodynamics that no one has ever been, sure, you can make anything work. But when it comes to reality, in here on Earth, where we remain and never leave, that's where you start running into a problem. Okay. Oh. Yes, we can predict the rate at which something will fall. Not a problem. Not a problem. The 9.2 meters per second squared, or 32 feet per second is an agreed upon average, just like the speed of light is an agreed upon average. It's erroneously used as a constant when in fact it is a variable, but nevertheless, the effect is measured. The cause of the effect is what is in question.
The speed of light does slow down in glass.
Well,
it's only in a vacuum, but it's a fixed speed.
I think it was 1923. It might have been 29. Physics convention in Bern, Switzerland. Madame Curie was there. Albert Einstein was there. Nikola Tesla was there. All these people. And that's where they came to an agreed upon average for the speed of light in a vacuum, because they had all gotten different results. They've never been able to measure a one-way speed of light. It's always based off of a return. So that kind of makes it a little bit murky as well. But nevertheless, that's just another side point. The 9.8 meters per second squared is an agreed upon average. This agreed upon average is taken by dropping objects in a vacuum chamber, where the medium was the modulated variable and not gravity. So it doesn't prove anything other than the fact that by decreasing the density of the medium, you can actually increase the reaction of the independent volume variable, which being the object, the bowling ball, the feather, whichever it may be. Okay. What has to be done is, and I know people like to talk about Cavendish. And personally, if I was a glober, I would not use Cavendish. I would be embarrassed to be using some janky 18th century contraption as my proof of mass attracting mass. It's nothing more than a display of torsion dynamics. That's all. Secondly, an experiment comes after an observation is made. No one has ever observed masses attracting one another. They've never seen that. So why would there be an experiment to show mass attracting mass? In fact, Cavendish wasn't even trying to show that. He was trying to calculate the mean density of the Earth.
Well, gravity is a very weak force, so it would be very difficult to show it on our everyday scales. You'd have to have.
Well, is it a force at all? Is there a force? See, there's this concept that there's a downward pull.
Well, as Einstein phrased,
ever considered the idea of an upward, a downward push.
Space tells mass how to move. Mass tells space how to bend, as Einstein said.
Well,
so that's the theory.
And what was the verifiable proof of that?
Well, most of Einstein's predictions have proven to be true.
Like what?
Well, the fact that GPS satellites, the calculations would be off by several meters if they didn't factor in relativity into the time it takes for the signal to travel up to the satellite and back.
You think your GPS is coming from little things flying out in space?
I do.
Why?
It's the most plausible explanation.
Really?
I haven't seen.
I've pinpointed locations of radio receivers using a method called triangulation and trilateralization to pinpoint the signal.
There may be alternative methods.
That's not alternative. That's been the method. That's what they're doing now. Now you can see your satellites all the time. They're not in space.
Oh, they've done experiments with these atomic clocks, haven't they? With the
I don't know who's they.
Aircraft traveling in opposite directions with these atomic clocks. Bring them back. They are
there again. Who's they? And I didn't do the experiment. I just heard that some guys did it, and this is what happened. Okay, yeah. Not something you can repeat, is it?
But there comes a point when you're going to have to accept that somebody's done it because you can't fly aircraft, military aircraft.
Of liars.
Well, I don't have.
I already know I'm dealing with a nest of liars, so it has to come down to repeatable, demonstrable experimentation.
Anyway, I have a question for you, which is
sure.
What one piece of evidence would convince you to change your mind? Is there a piece of evidence, something that somebody could show you
No, I deem the whole concept of a globular Earth to be scientifically impossible. It goes against the fundamental principles of physics and natural law. That's all there is to it. The entire story goes against natural law.
But what if somebody took you up in a rocket and showed you the curvature and showed you the
I
Earth?
wouldn't get in a rocket for nothing. There ain't no way I'd get in a rocket.
I can well believe that.
I'll tell you what, when they sending them things up there, I guarantee you there ain't nobody in them. There ain't nobody in their right mind going to get in one of those things and smash into whatever's making that big splash up there. Every time, look like a motorboat going across the water. Like if you was in an airplane looking down at a speedboat, it looked just like that, only looking up. I ain't no, I wouldn't do it. But take me up into that's never going to happen. You know, I mean, that'd be like me asking you, would you believe in Narnia if somebody took you through a wardrobe closet? I mean, it's not happening, man. You know, so that's just like kind of a not a question, really. I mean, really. Let me see if I got some more on here. Sovereign soul, unchained mind, what causes perpetual spin of a spherical Earth? So there's one that says, what do you figure causes the perpetual spin?
Yeah, well, I think the scientific explanation for that is the momentum when you've got an object as large as the Earth from the formation of the solar system. You had a rotation going on, and that rotation caused the objects to rotate and spin. I mean, there's two motions. There's one is the rotation on its axis, and then there's the rotation around the sun being the center of mass of the solar system. And given that space is a near vacuum, a very, very near vacuum, there isn't any force to slow that rotation down. Things just carry on moving unless there's a force to slow them down. And it's counterintuitive again, because on Earth, we don't observe that. If we take a miniature globe.
Let me just back up a little bit on that. So you said during the formation of the solar system. What was that like? What happened there? The formation of the solar system. How did a solar system form in a void such as space is described? I mean, we're talking about an area that actually NASA and physicists tell us is 10 to the negative 17 torr. And just to give you that, what that is, right now you're sitting in about 760 torr.
Yeah, I think the consensus is that it's been formed by the explosion of another star, a supernova explosion. As we observe on Earth atoms such as uranium, which can only be formed in a supernova explosion. Because
wait a minute, how do they know that?
Because of the energies that are needed to form that element from the compression.
Well, it sounds like a cool story, but there again, like Santa Claus, he lives at the North Pole and you can't go check for yourself, right? So it sounds like pseudoscience.
But one could be skeptical about the theory, but all I'm doing is explaining what the theory is.
Oh, I understand it. So this is my point, though, that, okay, first off, we start with the Jesuit. What was that guy's name? Lemaitre something? The guy that came up with the Big Bang? Anyway, a Jesuit, keep that in mind. If you've ever read the Jesuit Oath, keep it in mind even more. Came up with this theory of a Big Bang. So my biggest question about the Big Bang is, when in the history of anything exploding have the pieces from that explosion ever drawn closer to one another? Now, I don't know about you, but every explosion that I've ever witnessed, all the particles of that explosion radiate away. Radiate, keep that in mind, because the further they get, the further apart they get. Away from the center, the epicenter of that explosion.
But that's because it's not an explosion in the traditional sense that you understand. It's not an explosion into a space. It's the explosion of space itself into expansion. So it's called a Big Bang, but it's a little bit of a misnomer.
And you don't think that that sounds in any way whatsoever ridiculous as all hell?
But lots of things sound ridiculous. I mean,
Well, yeah, but here's the most fundamental thing to ask about that is how in the hell does anybody know any of that shit?
Well, I don't think anybody's pretending that they know for sure, but it's a prediction based on certain observations.
It happened 15 billion years ago or something, they said.
But they use this thing called the cosmic background radiation, which I'm sure you heard of.
How do they know that radiation's coming from the cosmic background? How do they know that radiation isn't actually coming from within the firmament itself?
Because
we don't have any idea what lies
wherever you point your probe or satellite or telescope, you observe it from all directions. It's very uniform, and the theory behind it is that it's so uniform that the universe hasn't been around long enough for.
Well, how did they determine it's coming from space?
Because it's coming from all directions, even upwards, and upwards you've got space. You've got land upwards.
Well, then how do you know it's just not coming from the container?
Because it's coming from outside the container.
How do you know that?
Because you're measuring it from coming outside the container.
How?
What is it? That's a bit like saying, well, how do you know the light's coming from outside and not from inside?
No, I'm just saying, how would they know it's coming from outside the container and not from the container itself? How did they determine the origin of the radiation? Oh, not without assuming that they're on some kind of
but the point I'm making is that the radiation is uniform. It's microwave radiation, which is a longer wavelength than the radiation that was emitted from the Big Bang. And so when you expand space, you also elongate the waves. So that's exactly what you. It's very consistent with what you'd expect. So from the gamma rays, you've now got microwaves in the 13 billion years since the Big Bang. And this radiation is all pervasive. It's very uniform. Now, that's very important because the fact that it's uniform suggests that the universe must have been much smaller earlier on, because it wouldn't be possible. The universe hasn't been around for long enough for the radiation to spread out via equilibrium.
You do realize that all of that is based on an assumption of a void.
Yeah.
It's based all in assumption. Do you know what we call that? Pseudoscience. That's what we call that. Pseudoscience. If it cannot be tested.
Well, what makes them think? What makes them think that the Big Bang happened is what they're observing. Is this thing called spectroscopy. So in chemistry,
I know all about spectroscopy.
You know about, but for the benefit of the audience,
containment of the element that is being checked.
Sure.
Spectroscopy in astronomy is pseudoscience. You cannot. You know what else gives off those spectrums, the light spectrums of different gases and things? You know what else gives those off? Light. Light gives off different spectrums. Okay. Doesn't necessarily mean that it's made up of some kind of an element.
Yeah, but nonetheless, that's how they came up with the theory of the Big Bang, is that they can observe the universe expanding because of the redshift of the spectroscopy and
redshift, blue shift,
cosmic background radiation, and then they've done some calculations and worked backwards and decided that the point at which it all started was 13. I forget the exact decimal, 13.6 or something, billion years ago, which is a long time ago, but it's actually...
If such a time actually exists. There again,
and of course, there's the
distances. I mean, look at the ridiculous things that they tell you. They tell you that these stars that you see in the night sky, clear. You see them clear, okay? They tell you that they are, in some instances, thousands of light years away. Now, how far is a light year? Let's take a look at how far that really is. Now they tell us that the sun we see is 8.5 light minutes.
That's
Let's
right.
just round it off to eight light minutes. We'll make it easy, right?
Yeah.
So now, if I were to double that, now we've got 16 light minutes. Probably wouldn't see a whole lot of change in size, right? But now let's move that thing 60 light minutes away. That's 1 light hour. Do you think you'd see a change in size? How about if I take it into, that's 1 light day. Let's move it 30 times that further away. Now it's a light month away. Do you think you'd still be able to see it?
It depends
No.
how big it is. It depends how big the
I'm
star.
going with the current size that they have right now, 836,000 miles in diameter. So now what happens is not only do you have angular size change, you also have a thing that's called a attenuation of the light. Okay, this is you can show this with the inverse square law of light. Okay, it gets the amount of the distance that a light travels is fully dependent on the energy placed in it into creating the light. This is why as your flashlight, the batteries start dying in it. You guys call them a torch. The battery starts to die. The range of the light doesn't go as far. And when it's got full batteries, I got one with them D cells batteries in it. I can get a pretty good long beam on that, but it's only good enough for what the power that I put into it. If I want to get a brighter light, I got to have a whole lot more power. A whole lot more power. So now we keep carrying this light distance thing, keep carrying it out to where you're at 1 light year. So, of course, they've had to make up astronomical, unfathomable sizes in order to tell you that these things are unfathomable, vast distances away from you. But I find it awful funny that if you take a telescope or a camera or a P900 or binoculars and you get focused in on one star, you're focused in on all of them, even though they're all vastly different distances away from each other. Another thing that's weird is they never parallax one another. They're always the same distance from one another. They're always in the same patterns. The only thing that changes is this pattern of lights in the sky seems to rotate above me. That's the only thing I see happening. I don't see any parallax between stars. So are the stars literally little lights that are way, way far away? Or are they right there?
I think it's a good point, but I believe the answer is that when they're all that far apart, you don't observe you only observe the parallax when you've got objects that are relatively close to you. If all of the objects are that far apart, there is parallax.
But given the eras of time, Kent, given the eras of time, it would. Yet they haven't. We have exactly the same constellations now as we did 1,000 years ago. Let's not forget the phenomenal speeds that this entire solar system is traveling through space as well. Away from the center, right? Away from the center. And it's supposedly going, I think, like, what is it, 500 million miles an hour?
It's very fast, but it's still very slow compared to the distances you're talking about. That's
you would still see parallax between stars, especially over 100-year period. You go from the early 20th century to today.
But who's
Traveling
around?
on
Who's around to measure?
phenomenal
Yeah, but who's going to be around 100 years to measure the parallax?
Well,
Nobody.
we have observational data from 1925, don't we?
I'm not sure anyone's measuring that though. Are they?
No, well, we have the positions of where the stars were as based by astronomers
It is a
100
good
years ago,
Yeah,
and
I'm
they've
going to
not
look
changed.
that up.
They've not changed. We've not gained any new constellations either. No new stars have suddenly come into view or anything else like that. Never. It's never happened. It remains the same as it was back then, always, which kind of you couldn't have if you were actually whirling through space at the phenomenal speeds that they say we are over a period of time. You would have covered a lot of space, in which time you would have seen definite parallax to the distant objects. I mean, you don't see a lot of parallax when you're on the freeway and there's a mountain in the distance. But over a period of time, but you do notice that the mountain has moved from your view, even though it was a very, very far away and it didn't seem to move at all.
It's a lot closer to you, isn't it?
Well, there again, the trees right next to me are moving by, really fast, but not as fast as the telephone poles on the side of the road. They're going by like this. I didn't change speed. They're stationary. Telephone poles are whipping by like this. The mountain's barely even moving, if even perceptibly moving. The trees in the mid-ground, are going by slower than the telephone poles. It's all just, that's how parallax works. And we would have observed that by now with the celestial bodies.
It is a good question. I will look into that. But I'll have to go now, Sov. But it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for.
Absolutely. So thank you for coming on.
Channel.
You were extremely. We broke the internet today, Kent. I think this is the first time in internet history that a cordial discussion such as this has actually taken place.
Likewise. Thank you so much. Yeah.
All right, Kent. You have a good night. See you next time. Hope to see you on another show. Come on in anytime.
Absolutely. Buddy. Thank you so much then. Okay.
All
bye,
right.
everyone. Bye.
So there he goes. So there you have it, guys. You can what, are you convinced of a globe? I don't know. I haven't been yet. I gotta say, Kent was a pleasure to have on. Very respectful, was able to illustrate his points to the best of his abilities, that he, why he thinks that. And I think that was an absolutely fair and honest debate. Hopefully, maybe we planted some seeds for him to look into, and maybe he will come to the conclusion that we do indeed not live on a magic water ball floating out in a void. So that's pretty much what we've got here this afternoon. We'll be going live again tonight at 9:35 Eastern. That's what this was supposed to be set up for, but we had a little bit of a time zone issue and seemed to have worked that out rather well. So like I said, tonight, 9:35 Eastern, we'll be live again for another episode of Sovereign Soul, Unchained Mind. And we hope to see everybody there. Welcome all the people that came in the middle that I didn't give shout outs to. We got Edward Hazebrook. Is that Hazebrook? We got HE Media showed up. Jeff Hunt. HE Media here. Ironworks, what's up, bro? Vlad. Blackula. I cracked my ass up when somebody called you Blackula the other night. You got Frank Noble showed up here too. Moomin Rider. I know. Took a bunch of you by surprise. What? Sam's going live in the afternoon. What the fuck? The world's coming to an end. Jehovah's Daughter Barbara made it. Catch 22, ZXL Master, all you good guys. Parody Bear here. Dollar Dome, schooling for Kent Reynolds. Hopefully. Frank Noble, let's see who else we got up in here. Is that Michelle? Simard, it's a strange spelling. Michelle, is that right? I don't know. Doc C, Mojo, what's up, brother? And Dead Reckoning, and all the rest of you that showed up here this afternoon. Thank you for showing up. Like I said, we'll be live again this evening. Be sure and catch us at 9:35 Central. If you're not subscribed, subscribe, share the broadcast. I think it was pretty good. So with that being said, we're just gonna go ahead and sign out of here, and we'll see you everybody tonight. Good night.